Welcome back, artists, and if you're new here, I'm Wyatt Paints. This week, I'm painting up one of my top 10 Marvel villains, Sabertooth. And if you're an MVC2 fan like I am, you're gonna appreciate the sculpt. A few weeks ago, when Golden Garbage showed me what's gonna be their first STL release and asked me to be a part of launching it, I had to jump on the chance. There was just no way to say no. It's Sabertooth. Sabertooth, especially this area of Sabertooth, scratches that nostalgic itch like nothing else has. Thankfully, it shouldn't be too hard to pull off, and if you follow these fundamental steps, I'm positive you'll have one as well. But before I start painting, I have a seam I need to take care of. So, meet me in front of the spray booth. Let's get started. Here I've glued up the base, but due to some warping, I have a significant gap right down the middle, which will need attention. What works in my favor here is this base is a combination of stone, roots, and snow. And wherever there's snow, I like to add snow texture paint. So a majority of this seam will be well hidden. If I focus my work on the areas where it crosses the root, I'll get the most out of my time. For this gap, I'm using Tamiya Basic Putty. Using this cheapo brush is as simple as loading the gap with putty and smoothing it over with light strokes, with extra attention given to all the faces in the wood. These remind me of the Haunted Forest stage in Mortal Kombat 2. Man, that game was pretty awesome as well. I guess this is my Memberberry episode. I'm closing in on 100 videos, so I guess I'm getting sentimental. Nevertheless, if you're going to give this technique a try, be sure to thin and smooth the fills perpendicular to the seam, laying the brush as flat as you can. And particularly when it comes to the wood, try keeping your strokes parallel with the wood grain. This will help ensure you maintain a lot of the sculpted texture by sweeping out excess, and any unintended brush strokes will blend in. With everything dried and primed, you can still notice the seam, but as I said, it'll be well hidden under snow. Now to assess the base, we have a complicated mix of stone, snow, and tree roots. To start, I want to focus on the rocks by first basing them in a deep gray. An interesting detail of this model is most of the intermixed rocks have been cut as separate pieces, and personally, I appreciate this. Not only does it make it easier to paint the individual rocks, but it also simplifies the base STL by eliminating overhangs, meaning few to no supports were needed on visible surfaces, which dramatically reduces the pre-painting prep work needed. That's an A+ for me. To stack on top of that base, ash is a great go-to for a light dry brush using a big floof. Keeping a close eye on the paint load will be critical if you want this to only catch on the edges. So be sure to use your texture palette to evenly distribute small amounts of paint throughout the bristles. Then do a quick check on the back of your hand. Taking this extra 10 seconds before touching your model can save a whole lot of grief. Moving on to the tree roots, I pulled out obsidian skin to start basing. Now, I get it may seem a bit weird to grab what is a skin tone for a tree trunk, especially with my old standard of tree ancient being such a good color. But with all the brown that's going to be in Sabertooth suit, I wanted a bit of a desaturated brown for the base. This way, the more saturated colors will be reserved for the main focus of the statue. Small decisions like this add up to help your figure stand out not only from the shelf, but from the base itself. Next, that wood needed some shading with dark tone. While the slight desaturation will help separate the shade from the suit, it does leave me with some washed out shadows. Adding a dark tone here will inject some much needed contrast into the deeper parts. This will give some extra readability. Just be sure to thin down the dark tone so that it flows better into the cracks. And remember, if one pass doesn't get it dark enough due to thinning, you can always do another. With the wash dry, it's time for a highlight with leather brown and a medium floofy brush. I went with a smaller brush here to have better control where it hits the model, as it takes tight aim to keep this restricted to the rocks. Any overspill on the snow can be ignored for now, but if you do get a bit on the rocks, you have a choice to make. If it's light, you can just leave it, as the touches here and there will just look like dirt creeping up from the roots. Or you can go back with thinned down deep gray to clean it up. With such a busy base, there's going to be so much going on with details to look at. Small things like this are the issues that only you as an artist will notice. And here's a secret. As you improve as an artist, it never goes away. At least for me, it hasn't. I've come to see it as a part of a healthy artist thought pattern. But also, don't always view things that you do different from other artists as wrong. As long as you have passion to improve it, it might just be your style. Moving on to the snow, I first want to block out and prep the surface with company gray. This won't be the final color. This is just to neutralize the black prime. If there happen to be any gaps in the snow texture, this will serve as shaded snow. Do your best to paint clean around the roots and rocks, but don't twist yourself in knots over it. Any slight overspill can be camouflaged with snow texture. Just make note of where it happened so you can cover it up. Now for the snow texture, I'm dipping back to my old standby, Snow Tex. It's cheap enough that it doesn't hurt my wallet too bad when I'm doing something this large. Trying to do a statue this big using something like Citadel texture plate would rely on me skipping many meals. So unless someone at Citadel would like to send me some free paint, I'm gonna stick with what's cheap. Just pile this up using a sacrificial brush over all of the snow areas, being sure to fill in all of the exposed seam. And what would have taken hours to fill and sand smooth would be forever hidden in seconds. Working smarter, not harder. Just keep in mind, working with this stuff is an exercise in accepting chaos. It's never gonna fully cooperate, so embrace it and do your best to pack it in where it needs to be and just let it do its thing. With the base all done, it's a perfect time to take a second to thank my subscribers over on Patreon. I can't begin to thank you for all the support you've given me, and sometimes it's just the kick in the butt motivator I need to get working. Plus, having electricity and heat It's kind of nice. So taking a few moments to show off all the names in the Hall of Greatness is just a small reflection of my gratitude. Thank you. If you would like to join the Painting Pantheon, you'll find a link to my Patreon below. Or you can support the channel right here on YouTube by liking, leaving a comment, and subscribing, making the community here one more cool person bigger. And I also want to take a moment to thank this week's sponsor, Golden Garbage Studios. I've been a longtime fan of their painting commissions over on Instagram, so when they reached out to collaborate, you know I was about it. And let me tell you, for a first time release STL, I was floored by the quality. Of course, all of the details are comic accurate, but this is a painting studio first, so all of the cuts are for the hobbyists. That way, they'll have an easier time to paint this to a high standard. They even convinced me to do something I normally don't do and used pre-supported files. Honestly, hats off. Or no hats off. If you would like to get your hands on this sculpt, be sure to check out their Patreon. Their link is going to be at the top of the description. You never know, this might be your next project. In the meantime, Sabertooth is just itching to get some mayhem done. Let's get back to it. To start on Mr. Creed here, I want to work up from the darkest colors, so brown sections first. Since I want a deep brown for this, I pulled out Tree Ancient to get me going. I had mentioned it before when doing the trunk, and as you can see, this is like super brown. It's that rich chocolatey goodness that's just perfect for the suit. I'm laying this down using an overbrush on medium floof. An overbrush is pretty much a dry brush, with the difference being the brush being overloaded with paint. But don't take that literally, it's just that the brush is loaded enough that it's visibly wet. I like using an overbrush for large area base coats because it's super fast. The application is very thin and it's much easier to get into the complicated surfaces like the hands. With practice, you can get a similar finish as with using an airbrush. Now, you may notice I opted to base everything rather than just the sections that'll be brown. This is because those sections will need to be much lighter, so a brown will give me an easier place to build up from later. After a solid base, everything needed a bit of definition, so I'm going back to some thinned down dark tone. I'm giving everything a wash and watching for pooling. These floofy brushes turn into excellent mops after a quick dab on the paper towel. Also, be aware that you have to blot up the pools multiple times. Don't just rely on checking when you're done with your first pass. Come back to it in 2 minutes and you'll find a new spot to blot up. This is because it takes time for the fluid to flow over the surface. All dry and it's time for a highlight, with Ancient Tree and Ruddy Umber at a 50-50 mix. I'm only targeting the areas that are going to remain this dark brown with a super light dry brush. A majority of this highlight is going to fall in the stitching, picking them out, but it'll also deposit almost invisible amounts across the texture of the flat surfaces and on the larger muscle striations. Keeping this nice and subtle should give me a nice sophisticated final look. Extra restraint will be needed when it comes to the hands. With so much detail, it'll be very easy to overdo this, so be sure your brush is extra light here. Heck, you might just catch me doing multiple hand checks before my brush hits the model, because they certainly help. Also, FYI, since the back is going to be mostly covered by the mane, you can use this area to practice and test your paint load before you commit to doing it to the front. Switching it up to the yellow. While I know how much I've bemoaned painting this color, with Sabertooth I have a wonderful alternative by going with Prairie Ochre. This yellow is deep in the brown side, so it covers particularly well. So using a small stiff bristle, I laid down a thin base. Even with the coverage of the shade, it'll still take multiple coats to get full opacity. and thankfully, the stiff bristles here will do the heavy lifting when it comes to keeping the fine grain of the suit's texture. Even with that insurance, it's still a good idea to do your due diligence and sweep any small pockets clear. Following this, I went back to soft tone to pin wash all of the stitch seams, just to add a bit of definition. This will also help clean up any slight overspill from painting the yellow. Just keep a very close eye on this sliding off the seams. Now it's time for a highlight on the yellow using burnt turf. Just like with the browns, I'm keeping this highlight soft and subtle. Personally, I find that softer contrast with shadows at this scale leads to a more realistic look. If you're coming from the miniature painting hobby, the usual goal is to push the contrast just as far as they can go. Getting that extra bit of contrast helps when it comes to readability at that scale. But with the larger format of 1/6 scale, you tend to have the luxury of not needing to go to such extremes. Moving on to his face, I have a bit of an experiment to try. Ever since Privateer Press went under, I ran out of my go-to skin colors of Bad Bruise and Midland Flesh. So today I'm going to try to find replacements with Alien Purple and Cobalt Skin. And to set up, I made two mixes of about 50-50 and 25-75. To start, I laid down a base of pure Alien Purple to cover up the prime and start a foundation to build from. Just an even, thin base. Then, moving up through the more fleshy mixes, I layered on the highlight tones, focusing on making sure the key areas got full opacity like the nose, chin, and cheeks, while leaving the deeper creases the base purple. And fair warning, this will look very wrong for most of the process, and it really won't come together until the final details are all filled in. So if you try this and get discouraged with how it's going, I urge you to push through to the end. You might just surprise yourself. Once I moved on to the lighter mix-ins, it was super important to thin my paints even more so I can use the translucency to my advantage by thinning and glazing them into the creases. This normalizes the purple there more towards the final flesh color. This is going to soften the transition to the shadows and make him look less like a corpse. Next, I pulled out Basilisk to line up his gums. This doesn't need to be pretty, as the margins will get repainted later. Just get the gums in. You could go for a lighter, more pinker color, but deeply red and swollen gums seems to fit Sabertooth. And while I had it out, it seemed like a good time to dab this into his face cuts. If you want this to be more bloody, you can always turn to a touch of blood for the blood god, but I'm going to keep a leash on this as I want to see how well the alien purple experiment pans out without too much extra covering it up. This was followed up with a dusky skull to pick out the teeth and skeletal bone to highlight them. Now, to the best of my memory, Sabertooth always had dark lips to mimic the animal of his namesake, so a deep chaotic red feels appropriate, followed by a bit of quick company gray to fill in his eyes. And while I could paint in some pupils, I'm going with the more feral look of whited out eyes, keeping things easy peasy. Now, to really tie the face together, his blonde locks needed addressing, first with a base of Barren Dune. With such a light color, it's going to take a few coats to get full coverage, especially if you properly thin your paint. Don't give in to the urge to just glob on some thick paint here. The fine grain of the sculpted hair will fill in pretty quick if you did, so keep it thin. So long as you give each layer plenty of time to dry, you should have a solid base in around 3 passes. To shade, I mixed up some soft tone and water to thin it down a bit and liberally applied it to flow deep into the folds. Simple as it gets. Just be sure to come back and dab out any heavy pulling, as it's a no bueno. We want thin lines, not deep pools. Finally, a bit of arid earth on a light dry brush can highlight the higher strands of the hair in a jiffy. Taking quick stock of my little experiment with the skin tone, I would say it's a marginal success. Not quite the look of my old paints, but it's close. To continue on with his hair, I painted up his mane in the same classic creamy blonde. So Barren Dune basing is step 1. Just be sure to come at the mane from all directions, as there are a lot of wavy curls stacked up on top of each other. You'll want to knock all that black down and get as even as a color tone as you can. Unfortunately, this took me around 4 coats, so you should be prepared for the same. Then you know what's coming next, a thin down all over soft tone wash. Finally, the super simple highlights of arid earth. And like before, because I only want this to kiss single strands, I swapped over to big floof and a very light paint load. Using single strokes that run perpendicular to the hair grain, I can pick out the more prominent tufts of hair for great definition and a range of colors in the mane. For the final details, I mixed up matte black with a touch of deep gray to give all of his claws and talons the once over. Nothing too fancy here, just paint within the lines and keep it smooth and you should be golden. But since I'm a madman, I decided to take the deep gray and lock in to paint the individual stitches on his gloves. And this took a very, very long time of high stress painting. I would only suggest this if you enjoy the self-torture, or you've got a long movie you've been meaning to watch. If you have infinite patience, you could choose to do all the stitching in the suit this way. I did not, and my annual watching of the Lord of the Rings extended trilogy was finishing up, so once the glove stitching was complete, I called this one done. And oh boy did this one turn out great! There's no better Sabertooth than the bloodthirsty, absolutely insane 90s version, and this sculpt certainly shows that. To be honest, I may go back and really bloody him up off camera. I just don't want to paint nightmares for any kiddos that might be watching. But hats off to Golden Garbage Studios for this monster of a sculpt. And quite literally, it's a hell of an STL to release as a first model. I really can't praise them enough. The pose, texture, all top notch. Even the pre-hollowed and supported files were great. I usually avoid those, but in this case, I'm glad my contact urged me to try them. Everything printed great. And while chatting with my contact, they told me that they plan on focusing on more underrepresented characters rather than releasing the 1 millionth Wolverine. Plus, they have plans of letting founding members have a hand in the design process of future releases. While I don't have a crystal ball, something tells me we're going to see a lot more Golden Garbage in the future, both on my channel and in the hobby at large. And for all my regular viewers, I'm sorry this video took so long to get out. As you could probably hear, my voice is still messed up from trying to get over a sickness, but I pushed through to get production moving. For now, I gotta get working on the next project. So, as always, thank you for watching, stay creative, and always enjoy the process.